Hello and welcome, dear friends, to yet another part of Amartya Sen's capability approach. In this part, we will discuss the key concepts of the approach and seek the relevance of comparative framework and Amartya Sen's idea of justice. First, we will understand the key concepts of capability approach. Sen fully developed his key concepts of well-being and agency in his famous lectures called Well-being, Agency and Freedom, the DV Lectures 1984, Inequality Re-examined in 1992 and reached to its final culmination in Development as Freedom in 1999. The well-being and agency are two equally important and interdependent aspects of human life and most significantly are distinguishable. Taken together, they can, according to Amartya Sen, correctly evaluate how well the life of individuals or groups is going, in a sense whether they are free to choose the achieved well-being. Through two cross-cutting distinctions between achievement and freedom on the one hand and well-being and freedom on the other, Amartya Sen highlights the internal plurality of capability approach. Any assessment of the individual or collective advantage or wellness should attend to at least four different evaluative spaces without being arbitrarily selective for a particular space. That's well-being achievement called functionings, well-being freedoms called capabilities, agency achievement and agency freedom. He consistently argues that we need to distinguish what we manage to accomplish, that's achievement, from whether we were free to attain the well-being and reiterates that two need not to be congruent. We are presenting a figure which clearly illustrates the distinctions. The cross-cutting distinctions between these concepts are very subtle and substantive and are central to the understanding of evaluative sphere of capability approach. Sen defines agency achievement as, I quote, a person's agency achievement refers to the realization of goals and values that she has reason to pursue, whether or not they are connected with her own well-being, unquote. It concerns to achievement of the totality of considered goals and objectives like independence of person's country, prosperity of a community, or elimination of a disease like cholera. While the well-being achievement, in contrast, is geared to a specific objective and concern not the totality of a person's considered goals. It would evaluate only the person's personal welfare, advantage or wellness and assess the extent to which agency achievement goals like independence of the country, community welfare or elimination of epidemic would contribute to her own well-being. Sen designates well-being achievement as functioning, that's being and doing a person manages to be and do. Similarly, there is a differentiation between well-being freedom and well-being achievement. The well-being freedom is the freedom a person actually has to achieve those things that are constitutive of one's well-being and is best reflected by person's capability set. Well-being freedoms are thus the real opportunities that a person has had to pursue his or her considered goals, which Amartya Sen refers as capabilities. The agency freedom is, like agency achievement, a broader concept and can be seen in the general terms, including the states of affair that relate to agency objectives, whether or not they directly contribute to one's well-being. Sen precisely defines agency freedom as the freedom to achieve whatever the person as a responsible agent decides he or she should achieve. Agency freedom is determined by open conditionality and thus cannot be examined in terms of any pre-specified objective. The agency freedom cannot be answered without taking the note of person's conception of the good and treats individual as responsible agents liable to moral accounting. This makes a fundamental difference between the two, and Amartya Sen goes on to suggest that agency freedom has claims to being taken as freedom taught court, which well-being freedom clearly does not have. With this introductory distinction, we turn our focus on the core concepts of capability approach, which are functionings, capabilities, and agency. Let's take up the first, functionings. Functionings are the valuable activities and states of being and doing that a person may achieve, and the quality of person's life can be judged from the vector of his or her functionings. Following Aristotle's concept of the good man in terms of life in the sense of activity, Amartya Sen regards functionings as diverse aspects and achievements of life that are constitutive of a person's being. They are the various things a person may value doing or being, and can vary from such elementary functionings like being adequately nourished, being in good health, avoiding escapable morbidity and premature mortality, to more complex activities such as being happy, having self-respect, appearing in public without shame, participating in community life and expressing political opinion quite freely. Functionings can therefore reflect various dimensions of well-being of a person, ranging from fulfilling the very basic requirements of survival to a fuller participation in the community life. A pertinent question arises: is there a need of a unique list or a bundle of central or basic functionings for measuring individual or social well-being? The functionings can be valued differently in different contexts, and also individuals may differ a great deal from each other in the weights they attach to these different functionings, even though they all may be valuable. The list of basic functionings can vary from one society to another, and any assessment of individual well-being or social advantage must be alive to these contextual variations and differential valuations. In making a social analysis of the cases of extreme poverty in developing economies, for example, Sen argues that we may be able to a fairly long distance with a relatively small number of centrally important functionings like adequate nourishment, good health, shelter, free mobility, avoiding escapable morbidity and premature mortality, and participation in community affairs. In some other contexts, the list may have to be longer and more complex. The evaluation and selection of relevant functionings opens up a condition for public reasoning and democracy. The capability approach always permits additional achievements to be defined and included, and the whole selection of relevant functionings or discrimination of trivial functions must focus on underlying concerns and values of necessary functionings of the society in question. The individual variability and social diversity determine the evaluative space and exercise of adoption of a primary list of functionings. Sen does not identify one set of basic functionings or basic capabilities precisely because no one set will do for every evaluation. Sen points out to it with a clarity. I quote, "A capability framework points towards a space, but even when the functionings have been selected and some ranges of weights specified, there will be the possibility that a particular policy A would be better for equality while policy B is better for aggregate achievement. These trade-offs are also part of the public judgment, and what this exercise requires is the identification of relevant considerations, suggesting particular proposals, and encouraging public discussion on these considerations and proposals." Unquote. This breadth is deliberate and intentional because it allows for the trivial exercise of identifying the objects of value and also assessing how valuable the objects of value are. It makes the approach precisely relevant to a wide variety of circumstances. Such flexibility in evaluation and focus on functionings make capability approach different from hitherto mainstream approaches like welfarism and Rawlsianism. But capability approach does not place an exclusive focus on functionings only, rather capabilities. A concentrated focus on achieved functionings alone is an incomplete approach and will amount to a similar drawback to that of utilitarian focus on utility only. Capability approach incorporates a person's freedom to achieve the well-being and whether the individual had a substantive freedom to achieve valuable beings and doings. To Amartya Sen, the functionings combined with substantive freedoms, called capabilities, provide a comprehensive framework of evaluation of well-being. In fact, capability not functioning, is the appropriate political goal. Let's move to capabilities. The concept closely related to the notions of functionings in capability approach is that of the capability to function. Functionings refer, as discussed, to the valuable states of being, while the capabilities refer to the freedoms a person has to do what he has a reason to do or be. Capability is a substantive freedom to achieve alternative functioning combinations, or less formally put, the freedom to achieve various lifestyles. The assessment which is blind to capabilities and focuses only on achieved functions is problematic and misleading. Amartya Sen gives an example of a rich who is on fasting by choice and a poor who is forced to starve. The achieved functionings in terms of nutrient intake would be almost similar, but the capability set of the two individuals differ drastically because the first person can choose to eat well but does not, while as the starving person has no choice at all. It is defined thus, I quote, "A person's capability refers to the alternative combinations of functionings that are feasible for her to achieve. Capability is thus a kind of a freedom, the substantive freedom to achieve alternative functioning combinations, or less formally put, the freedom to achieve various lifestyles. The capability set represents the freedom to achieve the alternative functioning combinations from which this person can choose." Unquote. Capability is thus an expression of freedom reflecting person's opportunities of well-being. Like a budget set, which represents person's freedom to buy commodity bundles, the capability is a set of real opportunities that you could use in one or another, the paths that lie open before you. In Amartya Sen's philosophy, it has both intrinsic importance as well as instrumental value. In the latter case, freedom is significant in judging how good a deal a person has in the society, and in the former case, it's fundamentally important for a good social structure. A good society, in this view, is also a society of freedom. Let's move to the third, which is agency. The functionings and capabilities are not the sufficient items of normative importance. Who decides what is important, or the process by which these decisions are made or enacted, are no less significant. The concept of agency is crucial in understanding the normative evaluative framework that Amartya Sen develops to assess the well-being, freedom and justice through his capability approach. Agency perspective views people as active agents capable of shaping themselves, their own lives, according to critically scrutinized values. Amartya Sen's work, Development as Freedom, 1999, underscores an agent-oriented view in which individuals and communities decide their own goals, take action, and are able to effectively shape their own destiny and help each other. The agency freedom holds primacy, for it's the principal determinant of individual initiative and social effectiveness of agency achievements. Agency, simply put, refers to person's ability to pursue and realize goals that she values and has a reason to value. Unlike in game theory, where an agent denotes a person who is acting on someone else's behalf, Amartya Sen uses the term in its older and grander sense, wherein an agent is someone who acts and brings about a change and whose achievements can be judged in terms of her own values and objects. In this perspective, individual is seen as an active participant in change rather than a passive or a docile recipient of instructions or of dispensed assistance. The opposite of a person with agency is someone who is forced, oppressed, or passive. What action can designate as agency action, and what are the necessary requirements to call a person or group with respect to a particular action as agency? David Crocker and Ingrid Robbins, in their illuminating paper, describe 4 dimensions of agency. First, self-determination. When a person is forced to do a particular act through external coercion or internal compulsion, or is being manipulated, there is a clear violation of agency freedom. Even though the agent might have desired for the same action, yet not undertaking it under self-direction is not exercise of agency. A person A, for example, had intended to donate some money to some people living in a famine-hit refugee camp, but is abducted on the way by some people who forcibly collect money for the same camp, asking either to give money or life is all but a minimal agency freedom. Second dimension of the agency, according to them, is reason, orientation and deliberation. If a person intends to act on a purpose, he or she must have a reason for such a goal. It must withstand the public scrutiny, and Sen would call it reasoned agency or critical agency. The freedom and power to act is not merely needed, but also freedom and power to question and reassess the prevailing norms and values. Sen firmly believes that there is no escape from reason, and whim or mere wish do not find a place in his concept of agency. The third condition for the agency realization is action. It's very important for the people or groups to be able to act in accordance with the deliberated reasons and values. If people utterly fail to act or do not take action because of the institutional or behavioral shortcomings in a particular society or a situation, they lack agency. People should be able to realize the objectives by their own efforts and participate in pursuit of the set of objectives. Amartya Sen calls such an accomplishment as instrumental agency success. Finally, agent's action does have an impact on the world. The agent's action must have some impact either on larger or smaller. It is to influence the actual life, and the agent, whether individual or group, is able to bring a desired change in the life on the basis of acclaimed reason. This requires that agency freedom of a person or a group is greatly enhanced. He clearly argues, I quote, "Greater freedom enhances the ability of people to help themselves and also to influence the world, and these matters are central to the process of development," unquote. Amartya Sen is quite attentive to the fact that a person may achieve the valuable goals without actually working for their pursuit directly. These may come as gifts without asking for any labor for their realization. What makes agency valuable then? Sen holds agency valuable in three ways. First, intrinsically; second, instrumentally; and third, constructively. Agency is in itself valuable and must be valued for its own sake. It's intrinsically valuable because it's better for a person to act rather than be acted upon, either as someone else's tool or a pawn of circumstance. Individuals, according to Sen, must be in charge of their own well-being, and they cannot be seen merely as patients to whom benefits will be dispensed by the processes of development. The state and society must affirm to the best possible exercise of agency freedom, and it is ultimately individual's responsibility to decide what use to make of the opportunities provided by the society. Here, Sen gives an additional justification of the intrinsic value of the agency by relating it to the morally responsible conception of the person. Agents can use freedom also as means to achieve some desired goals. It becomes instrument of an action for the pursuit of a particular goal. If people are allowed to exercise their freedom, run the life, and make their decisions freely, they are able to live a worthy life, or else there is a risk of what they may be living as well-fed, well-clothed, well-entertained vessels. Sen believes that when people act as citizens who matter and whose voice counts, they greatly contribute to the joint social action. This instrumental role of agency is vital for realization of democracy in every society, and in turn, any democratic setup would undoubtedly enhance the political and civil freedoms. He clearly states, I quote, social arrangements involving many institutions, the state, the market, the legal systems, political parties, the media, public interest groups, and public discussion forums, among others, are investigated in terms of their contribution to enhancing and guaranteeing the substantive freedoms of individuals seen as active agents of change rather than passive recipients of dispensed benefits." Unquote. The agency role of human action can be a means to promote the collective agency of the society. Through a continuous deliberation, individuals can critically examine the goods they value or realize the goods to be valued in an atmosphere of a mutual learning. It's here the agency dimension of the capability approach becomes both means as well as end of the development, democracy, and social justice. Sand calls it constructive value. It must be noted here that capability approach requires democratic deliberation, and through this dimension of constructive value, it promotes democracy. Let's move to the final section of the lecture. That's why we require a comparative framework, which Sand discusses in his work, The Idea of Justice, published in 2009. The European Enlightenment is featured by two methodological currents, transcendentalism and comparative approach. The former is a popular and dominant in contemporary theories of justice. Contrary to it, comparative approach is less dominant. The other, that was followed by a number of theorists who were concerned with the actual institutions and actual behavior of the societies and individuals. These theorists adopted different ways of doing comparative assessments of the societies that either already existed or could emerge from the actual social conditions. Instead of searching for transcendental institutions, they were interested in eliminating the manifest injustice from the world they saw. Amartya Sen follows this realization-focused comparative approach developed in different ways by Adam Smith, Max de Condorcet, Jeremy Bentham, Mary Wollstonecraft, Karl Marx, and John Stuart Mill in the 18th and 19th century Europe. He takes the route of social choice theory to make the case for concentrating on making comparative evaluations over actual social realizations. The penultimate section of The Idea of Justice sums it up. I quote, "There is a strong case for replacing what I have been calling transcendental institutionalism that underlies the most of the mainstream approaches to justice in contemporary political philosophy, including John Rawls's theory of justice as fairness, by focusing questions of justice first on assessment of social realization, that's on what actually happens, rather than merely on the appraisal of institutions and arrangements, and second on comparative issues of enhancement of justice rather than trying to identify perfectly just arrangements." Unquote. This departure from social contract to social choice is illustrated by a trilemma in The Idea of Justice. Three children, Anne, Bob, and Carla, are fighting over a flute, and all the three children put forward reasons for their claims for getting the flute. Anne is the only child among the three who can actually play the flute, and claims for the flute on the grounds of her ability of playing the flute. The other two children do not deny this. Her case is strong enough to get the flute if that's the only information available to us. In an alternative case, Bob belongs to a destitute family and does not have any toys of his own at his home. Among the three, he is the poorest of all, and other two children validate that they are richer than Bob. He is sure to get the flute if his was the only case for it, not of the other two. In another scenario, it's now Carla who claims for the flute on the grounds that she is the only child who worked diligently to make the flute by her own labor over months. She mixed her labor with it, but the other two snatched the flute from her. The other two children confirm her argument. Had she been the only child to speak up for getting the flute, she would safely get it back for being the owner of it. Once the three children make the claim for the flute and place their reasons for it, there is a difficult decision that you have to make. The claims of the children are not far from reasons, and the decision to award the flute to any particular child is not so easy if the comparative evaluation is immediate. Transcendental institutions close the impartiality and face a limitation when actual social realization is brought to fore. For example, a libertarian will give flute to Carla as she is the one who made it, while as the utilitarian would be more inclined to award the flute to Anne as she is the only one who can play the flute. Bob would get favor of egalitarians. The utilitarian can award it to Anne if the sum total of happiness generated is greatest. An extreme leftist can give it to Carla for the reward of the fruit of labor and thus joins the right libertarians. In this case, interestingly, Sand does not give us answer that who among the three children should get the flute. Sand, being a capability theorist, may be more inclined to award the flute to Bob, who may develop the skill of flute playing, since the other two children, Carla and Anne, already have the capabilities of flute making and playing respectively. There is every possibility that with the availability of raw material, Carla will not find it difficult to make the one, and since Anne knows the flute playing, she may also have one at her home. There is something common to all the possible answers or positions from extreme right to extreme left, that's reasoning. There is no escape from critical reasoning and impartial scrutiny. That is the commonality between the two traditions of enlightenment, and the practices of reasoned arguments have a history that goes well beyond European enlightenment. To conclude, the diversities that range from intrapersonal to cultural variations necessitate an engagement that remains sensitive to the choices that individuals make and also to the processes of realization of human freedom. A basic drawback with the universal approach is its insensitivity to persons' moral positioning on the one side and pervasive diversity that's internal to her on the other. The institution-centric approach by its very foundation is blind to both the outcome of the procedures as well as to the actual life. The contemporary political philosophy is dominated by transcendental institutionalism, irrespective of the position or focus on either liberty or equality. There is a great merit in taking a departure from the way such theorization is made and also the background against which such theorization is made. Amartya Sen's interventions are centrally important for the realization of functionings that are grounded in human freedom and democracy. Dear friends, this was all about today's lecture. Hope it carried well. We shall meet again with a new topic. Till then, take care of your good self. Goodbye.